Today is December 15th, 2009. My name is Jacob Sherman of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program, and I'm here today in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, interviewing Dr. Billy Webb. This interview is being conducted in part of the Oklahoma State Stories Project, and today we're going to interview Dr. Webb about his life and career at Oklahoma State University and his work with the Magruder Plots. So first off, can you describe for me your background growing up and your family life growing up?
Okay. I'm raised on the farm, born in March 13th, 1930, and spent my entire life on that farm until I went to college at Cameron State University, and was there 2 years, and graduated from high school in 1948, and then I went to Cameron. But I was in a farm family and farmed with my father, helped him farm until, well, even after I went to college, I'd come back home and help him farm. And was just decided I was going to major in agriculture, or some phase of agriculture. Initially, I thought that I would major in animal science, and when I went to Cameron, there was a gentleman by the name of Don Profit, and he really took me under his wing as a student and helped me along through school. And his major was agronomy. Mm-hmm. So I decided, well, I think that's a good major in agronomy. So I majored in agronomy there, and then when I went to Oklahoma State University in 1950, then I went into agronomy at that time. And then graduated in 1952, and then went back to the farm. I was married at that time, and went back to the farm, and we lived on the farm for 4 years, 4 very difficult years, because there was a drought period, mm-hmm. and it was just difficult to make a living in drought years on the farm. So I don't know just exactly how it happened. I was at a field day at Oklahoma A&M at that time, and happened to run across a fellow by the name of one of the Hugh. First name was Hugh, and he had been in Ethiopia, and I had written a letter to Dr. Pat Murphy, who was one of my professors in school, and was just telling them that it was an interesting program that they were in. If they ever had need for someone with my skills, I'd consider it. And so Ralph, can't say his name, there's the last name, Hugh Rauch, interviewed me then after the field day in Stillwater. And then they came to the farm and interviewed us again, along with my wife. And at that time we had 2 children, and this was along in May of 1956. And they eventually, within a month or so, offered us the opportunity to go to Ethiopia and be on a research station there. Mm-hmm. So we took that, even though it was somewhat painful to leave the farm, but we went ahead and went went to Ethiopia, and I told my dad, well, I'll go there a couple of years and then I'll come back and farm, and maybe the weather conditions would be better. So we went over there and decided to go a second tour, and so we did. And then when we came back in December of 1960, then Dr. Murphy had sent me a letter, and he was back on campus at that time. He sent me a letter and invited me to do a master's program at Oklahoma A&M. So we started that, and then this one thing led to another. Finished that in '52, and so then this one stayed the 4 years on the farm and then went to Ethiopia. So, and then we were appointed to a position, station superintendent at Altus. It had 2 locations, Altus and Tipton, and we were there about 3 years, and then went to K-State to do the PhD in 1967, and finished it in 1970, and had an opportunity to come back to Oklahoma State University at that time, and would be in charge of the agronomy research stations over the state. There were 13 locations, and some of the fellows that were on those stations were classmates, and so it turned out to be a very, very rewarding experience. And so I was there for 25 years, and then I retired.
Now, backing up a little bit, you grew up during an interesting time period in the 1930s. What do you remember most about that era?
Well, I remember that it was a pretty tough time. It was after another siege of droughts, and I can remember that we, my parents were hard workers. They had cattle and sheep and farmland, and at that time land was rather cheap, but no one had money to buy land, and so we first lived on a farm that belonged to my dad's aunt and her husband. It was some of the land that their forefathers had for quite some time. And my granddad Webb did not make the run into Oklahoma, but he bought the rights of an individual that did, and they provided him what they called a patent at that time, and this patent had Theodore Roosevelt's signature on it, and I still have that.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I inherited that quarter section, and we still have it. And but back to your question, it was a tough time growing up in the 30s, but everybody had a tough time, so it was something that everybody understood the problems that everyone else had. So we were all in the same boat, and we went to school, and when we got out of school, we'd go home and work on the farm and work on the weekends, and it was sort of rare that you'd be able to buy land, but my parents eventually did buy the quarter section that I was born on, and so it long about the time I was graduating high school, things had sort of turned around, and my dad and mother built a new house, and it was a house that was made out of rock that they hauled from Ada, Oklahoma. It was a kind of a light greenish color rock, still there. Probably there for who knows how long. So
Now, was you were in Custer County, right?
yes,
And was that affected by the Dust Bowl at all, or?
it was. It was. In fact, even after it was affected by the Dust Bowl in the 30s, early 30s, and then when my wife and I, Jean, moved back to the farm in 1952, there was, as I said earlier, there was a drought, and I can remember even then of dust coming up, wind blowing, and it just looked like it was going to turn night. I mean, it was that bad, blowing dust in the 1950s, and it was just really an experience that I hope we don't have again.
Now, what kind of, so when these dust storms arose, what kind of precautions did you take, or what did you do during them? Did you cover your mouth, or?
Oh yeah. Well, we'd get inside, and then if we had to be outside, we'd cover our mouth. I can remember visiting my dad's uncle in Beaver County, and he said that he had to literally take a scoop shovel and scoop the dust out of his house after a dust storm. That was in Beaver County, and it wasn't quite that bad in the 50s that I experienced, but it was bad. And yes, you get inside where you don't inhale so much of that dust that was in the air.
Now, did you ever experience the electrical storms as part of the dust storms?
Not really. There were some electrical, some lightning, and occasionally, but it was not. There were areas where it did hit, it would damage very much, but we didn't experience it in our particular area.
Now, you grew up in wheat country?
Wheat, barley, oats, primarily wheat, livestock. At that time, livestock was primarily cattle. There were quite a number of herds of sheep around, and my dad had he would usually have somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 150 head of sheep, and swine. We'd always had swine, and we'd take them when they're ready to sell. We'd load them in the pickup or truck, whatever we had at that time, and take them to Oklahoma City stock yard.
Now, do you remember the first tractor that you drove?
Yes.
And what was that?
It was a Case C case, and it was a little low tractor, and it pulled a small plow, and one of the fields that my dad was farming was about close to 100 acres, and it would take us almost a whole week plowing that large block of land, and it's still in the family. We still have it, and we still have our home place, My brother and I have both half interest in it. And it was a pretty small tractor. It was a 1929 C case. And my dad then, sometime later, I guess mid-40s, he had an opportunity to buy another seat case. It was a 1938 model, and he bought that, and so then we had two tractors, and then a little while later, and everyone was getting either more tractors or larger tractors at that time. A little bit later, he bought a Model L tractor, and none of those tractors had umbrellas on it. So I've never driven a tractor that has a cab or an under umbrella or cab. I've never. I was put on a shirt and went out and drove the tractor in the sun.
Yeah. Now, how old were you when you first drove a tractor?
Oh, probably, I'd say 10 or 11.
Okay. And what kind of daily chores did you have on the farm?
Well, it was my responsibility to get the milk cows up and milk of an evening and none of a morning before I went to school. And my brother, I had one brother, and he would help with the sheep and the swine, and I'd take care of the milking of the milk cows, milking and feeding them.
What time did you have to get up then to milk those cows?
Oh, probably 6 o'clock, and catch the bus to school in 8 or 8:30, something like that. And school always started at 9 o'clock, and let out at 4 o'clock. I think the school systems now have some different schedules.
What kind of cows did you milk?
We had Jerseys and Shorthorns, and occasionally we'd have a Holstein.
Now, is there any difference between Shorthorns and Jerseys milk productions than regular Holsteins?
Well, normally the Shorthorns would provide more milk, more quantity, but the Jerseys had higher content of cream, and we regardless of what the breed of cattle was, we would separate, pour it into a bowl, and then had to crank a separator to separate the milk, the cheese out of the milk, and put the cheese into a 10-gallon cream can, and either carry it to the produce in town, or eventually there was a truck route that would come by and pick up the cream, and this was for the gold spot in Enid.
Okay.
And of course they used it to make butter and other products.
Now, were you involved with 4-H at all growing up?
No, not really. I did go on one 4-H trip with the county agricultural agent, and I did take that one trip to Lake Carl, Blackwell, there west of Stillwater, and that was all 4-H that I did. We had too much work to do. We didn't have work to have time to spend with 4-H. 4-H was a wonderful program, and there were a lot of kids that did participate in the program, but we never did.
Now, did you ever show at the county fair?
No,
No.
never did.
Okay. Now, did the war affect your family farm at all?
Oh, not really, except we were limited for the gasoline for vehicles. I should state for non-agricultural use. If you wanted to go to Oklahoma City in a car, then you had to have a different kind of stamp to buy fuel. And but we didn't have a car at that time. We had a pickup, and so the pickups and trucks, you could get about all the fuel that you needed from them because they were agricultural equipment that served in agriculture and production. So.
Now, how often would you go to town?
About every Saturday night.
Every Saturday night. What did you do on Saturday nights then?
I would run up down the street and eventually when the movie opened, we'd go to a movie. And it was open, I think, on Friday night and Saturday night only. And we'd go to a movie and go to the drugstore and get a soda. And Mother and Dad would get groceries at the grocery store. And if he needed some hardware, he'd go to the hardware store. And so we didn't go to town very much during the week.
Now, how big was your high school?
I think it had about 300 students in all.
And what high school was this?
Custer City High School.
Custer City. Is that the county seat over there?
No, Arapahoe's the county seat.
Okay.
There goes my wife. She's going to a hair appointment.
So, how far was Arapahoe from your farm?
Oh, it was about 16, 18 miles, I guess, to Arapahoe,
Okay.
county seat.
And how big was your graduating class then?
I think there were 13 of us.
13 of you? Now, you went to Cameron for 2 years?
Yes.
And you got your associates in what?
Then as soon as I finished Cameron, went to OSU then. I considered, that was during the Korean
Conflict.
Yeah, and I considered volunteering to the Army and not go to OSU. But then I decided, well, if they need me, they'll draft me, and I'd be willing to go. But I didn't. I did register, and I had a draft card, but I was never called.
But in OSU, you did ROTC, I assume.
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Now, what was your first impressions of Oklahoma State University? What do you remember?
I was really amazed at the size of it. Of course, I was comparing it to the size of Cameron. And when I was at Cameron, 2 years, both years, our soils judging and crop judging team went to OSU A&M and competed there in contests. And then the second year, I couldn't go and compete in agronomy, so I went to enter into a contest in poultry. And a friend of mine had been on the poultry judging team the previous year, and so he was our coach at Cameron, and we went to Oklahoma State then for the poultry judging contest. And so I was sort of knew what OSU was and what it looked like when I went up there. And of course, just took off, started my last 2 years there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really impressed with the campus and with the facilities and the opportunity I had.
Now, do you have any particular fond memories that stand out about your time at Oklahoma State University from your undergraduate years?
Well, yes. It was one thing that I talk about back when we were there. There was you'd be going to and from classes, and they had an old dog named Sick, I believe was his name, and he would always be on campus, and people would stop and pet him, and that was kind of interesting because he was just a docile little fellow that liked to be talked to and liked to be petted, and and there were other things that were fascinating to me. The professors were fellows that had been going to school not too many years prior to when I was there, and then some of them were there that was teaching when my dad went to Oklahoma A&M, and so I made acquaintance with them and those fellows, and it was amazing. You go to one of those fellows maybe to visit, maybe you had a problem, and it was an experience that I really appreciated. Everybody would help you if you, as long as you behave yourself and try. Well, they would help you, and that was really I was really impressed with that, and the facilities were quite nice, and I went out for crops judging. I did not make the team that went on, but it was a lot of good experience there, and some good fellows that I worked with.
You participate in the soil judging?
Crops judging.
Crops judging?
Yes.
Did you do any live animal judging?
Never did.
Never did?
Never did.
Now, were you at the time when they put a beef cow up in the Union? Were you there? Have you heard that story?
I was there when the engineers, this is what I was told, and I think it's correct. The engineers took the bull that was on the front of the Animal Science building, stole that bull and cut the testicles off of it and buried it under a tree over somewhere east of the Union. Now, I wasn't there, I didn't witness it, but this is what I was told, and I really kind of I really don't doubt it, because almost everything went on mischievous there.
Yeah, that's what I heard from that time period, is just a bunch of pranks going on.
Oh yeah.
Did you do any pranks, or?
I was not involved in that. I can't remember any particular prank associated like that I was involved in. I wasn't any angel, I'll have to admit that, but I don't recall being mischievous like that.
What did you do for fun when you were on campus in Stillwater?
Fun?
Yes, to relax.
Well, occasionally we'd go fishing. Some of us would go fishing out on Lake Carblackwell, We would get together and play dominoes or play cards at some of the other married couples' place. And but basically we're busy enough we didn't have all that much time to get involved in too much mischievous.
Now, you lived in married student housing?
Lived in, no, never did live in
Okay.
married student housing. We rented a place just across the street east from what then was called the auditorium, but I think it has a name now, but it was just across the street east of the auditorium, and there was an apartment in the back of the house back there, and we lived in that. And it was just, we didn't have to walk very far to classes, and it was very convenient. And the fact of the matter is, it was, you go out the back door, go to the alley, and go north, and there was a grocery store there, and it's now the restaurant of well, it's good grief.
Eskimo Joe's?
Eskimo Joe's, yeah. It's now Mexico Joe's, and it used to be a grocery store there, and we'd go buy groceries there.
Okay. Didn't know that was a grocery store a long time ago.
Well, he has about 2 or 3 stores, places there, and one of those was a grocery store.
Yeah. Now, I was trying to ask you. I had a train of thought, but I lost it. Now, did you witness any sporting events at that time, or did you go and partake into any of that?
I didn't participate in them, but I would go to the basketball games and some of the football games, and I never did go to baseball games. But yeah, we'd go. We saw the Harlem Globetrotters in there play one game while we were there. So.
Do you remember what Gallagher IVA was like when you were a student? Can you recall?
Oh yes, yeah. It was a nice facility. It was built, as my understanding was, it was built for a 4-H program, for 4-H programs to be in there. And it was at the time it was a very nice place, very nice. And I think they still have the same floor in that now that
Yes, they do.
that was there when we were there.
The same old maple.
Yeah.
Still on there. Do you remember Mr. IVA at all, or no?
Yes, I remember him, and I had lunch with him one time. After I went to Lawton, or to Altus, as superintendent of the research station down there, a friend of mine that I had made down there, Mr. Williams, Bill Williams, was on the Board of Regents at that time, and he was going to be coming to Oklahoma State campus for a board meeting, and they were sending a plane down to pick him up and take him, and he invited me to go with him if I had something I needed to do on campus. Not to go. No, he didn't invite me to go to the board meeting, and I wouldn't expect that, and that wasn't his invitation. It was just to go and do whatever I needed to do if I had something there, and so I did. And so I met up with him at lunch, and he said, "Well, let's go to lunch." And I said, "Okay, let's." So we went over to Union, and they had lunch. We had lunch over there, and Henry Iba was across the table. I can't remember. He was at that table, and had the opportunity to visit with him at that time. Of course, I'd seen him a lot, but that was the only time that I had to visit with him.
What was your impressions of him?
Oh, I was really impressed. I'd made that thought and feeling a long time ago.
Now, after you graduated from OEMC, you went back to work on your family farms.
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes.
Now, for me, I really don't know much about the early 50s drought. Maybe can you share a little bit more about what that was like?
Well, one thing that it's still painful to me, but I remember. Normally, you would plant wheat in the latter part of August or in September. And this particular year, and I can't remember which year it was, that we didn't have enough moisture to plant wheat until the 1st of December. And when you plant wheat 1st of December, you don't get much crop. And even though if you had plenty of moisture at that time, that's just too short of a period of time for a wheat plant to emerge and develop and produce a good crop. So we did have a good crop that year. And if we would get 6 or 8, 10 bushels, that's about all we could get during those drought years. Sometimes you wouldn't get anything, you just go plow it up and get ready for another crop.
Now, was there soil conservation programs out in that area?
Mm-hmm.
And what were they like?
Well, they were very helpful. They would help us to give us guidance and help with putting in terraces into fields that had an erosion problem, and that was one of the primary assistance that was coming out of Soil Conservation Service at that time. They were also they would suggest crops that would be on the surface when the windstorm had come by, and if someone was cultivating a piece of land that was had too much drop to it, then they would suggest putting it back to pasture, which was a good thing to do. And some people did it, but not enough. There was still quite a bit of erosion.
At that time, did they plant natural grasses back into the soils?
Yes, they would attempt to put grasses back into those areas that maybe was native or that had proven that they would be productive, maybe coming in from outside. But yes, they would recommend some of the old grasses, little and big blue stem, and Indian grass, and there's one more. I'll think of it in a minute. But what they call the four primary grasses: Indian grass, little big blue stem, and I'll think of it.
Okay. What was the relationship between farmers and county extension agents at that time?
Well, it was good. I think most of the county agents were very helpful and would suggest approaches that would actually be very helpful if they could get the crop planted in time, or get the grass planted in time, or put out the, try to stop the erosions. Yeah, they were very helpful.
And how would you compare the early 50s drought with the 30s droughts? Is there a comparison that can be made?
Well, I was rather small in the 30s drought time, and I think maybe it was perhaps a little bit more severe than the 50s, as I would evaluate it at this point. They were both devastating, but I think the 30s was probably the most devastation.
Did you have combines at that time? When did combines come into play?
What?
Combines.
Combines? My dad had a combine, I guess, when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. He bought an M&M combine that was be pulled by a tractor, and I was driving a tractor when I was probably 10 years old for a combine. And my dad would ride the combine, and of course you got to raise and lower the cutter bar, and that's what he would do. And I'd drive the tractor and try to keep the combining a full swath of wheat.
Sort of those type of combines, they're sort of like hay balers in a way.
Oh, no, not really. They're quite a bit different. And I can remember the hay balers that I first knew were stationary hay balers. So we'd gather up the crop in the field and take it to the baler, and then we had to throw it in the baler, and someone else would have to tie the bales, and so it was kind of a complicated issue there, and took a lot of help, a lot of labor. And I can remember the first pulled baler that I saw was one that was a stationary baler, and the neighbor had made some kind of a gathering operation so that you could pull that with a tractor, and that's the first one I ever saw. And then of course they made balers in for that purpose, and I don't know just what year they came out, but I was probably 8 or 10 years old when this neighbor perfected this combine. This baler. Yeah.
I was just curious. Now, you went back to Oklahoma State for your master's.
Yes.
Was it agronomy or was it soil sciences?
It was agronomy at that time, but I was doing my master's in crops, and well, let's see. I guess really maybe I was leaning a little more to soils at that time, because Dr. Pat Murphy was a soils professor and a department head, and so he kind of encouraged me to look at soils. So I was kind of making the transition then and went into soils at that time. And he went back to Ethiopia during the time I was doing my master's program, and Dr. Tucker then was my advisor and helped me get through the master's program.
Now, Dr. Tucker, he wasn't that much older than you.
No, he was 3 or 4 years older than me. I attended his 80th birthday a couple of years ago, and I'll have that same level, same figure,
Same
about
milestone.
3 months. Yeah.
What was he like to work under? What kind of professor? What was his traits?
Dr. Tucker?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you couldn't beat him. He was a Western Oklahoma farm boy also, and we thought alike. And he was extremely helpful, and I couldn't have found a better advisor than Dr. Tucker.
He grew up in Sarah, right?
Yes, in the Sarah area. I think he was a little north of Sarah, but yes.
So not too far from you?
Not too far from me. I didn't know him until he was about ready to graduate. He graduated a year or so ahead of me, and then he went to University of Illinois, and so I had known him since probably 51 or 52, and so that's been quite a while ago.
What was your thesis on? What did you write about?
Well, it's on nitrogen availability and nitrogen utilization and wheat production.
Did you do your lab work with the McGruder Plots, or did you work elsewhere?
I did not do any lab work with the Magruder Plots at that time, although I knew about the Magruder Plots. It hadn't been too many years prior to that when the Magruder Plots were moved from where now one of the dormitories sit out onto the agronomy farm. And that was a little bit difficult for me to understand just how that worked, why it would work, but it did. And I'm not trying to indicate that I had any opposition to it at all, but I think that happened during Dr. Murphy's era, or it might have been there may have been someone else that sort of that led that program into moving that Magruder Plots.
So your research, was that on the crop farms south by Perkins there, or?
No, I did not have any. I did not have any participation in the Perkins program until I came back as superintendent of all the stations, and then that was one of the stations that I did work with.
And then, after you got your master's, you took some time off in Ethiopia, which hopefully we can discuss at a further time.
Mm-hmm.
But you went up to Kansas State for your PhD.
Yes.
Did you study a similar topic up there?
I did, and I also really worked on phosphorus more so than nitrogen up there. The polyphosphates and so on in wheat production.
Now, how did Kansas State rate as a soil sciences program? Because both Dr. Tucker and Westerman went to the University of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Did they rate as good, if not better, than Illinois? Or
Illinois probably had a little more prestigious feeling among people in the graduate program. I think they were not better, but maybe approached a little different way, and that was an older program up there than Kansas State. Kansas State had a good program by the time I went there, but they were still working in a lot of the basics at University of Illinois. This is my opinion. that the University of Illinois perhaps had done previous years. But I really looked at it again and got an extremely good advisor at K-State. And at that time, we had 6 children, and I was busy. Every night I'd go back to the lab and study and work, and it was a real good experience at K-State. That was a great experience.
How does Manhattan relate to Stillwater?
Oh, I'd say they're a little. Well, I don't think one of them could rate higher than the other one.
Okay.
I think they're both extremely quality locations. There were features that we really loved Manhattan, but we loved Stillwater too. I think their facilities and their programs and their professors and they're comparable.
Between that time. Okay. After you got your PhD, then you moved back to Stillwater?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
How were you offered a position at OSU?
Well, I was, of course, I had stayed in contact with Dr. Tucker, and I knew that, and I knew some of the other faculty members, and one of them was getting ready to be, well, I guess he had already been appointed head of the department, Dr. Matlock, and I had worked with Dr. Matlock some when I was there in OSU, and so one time that I was leaving, went from Manhattan to Custer, I stopped in Stillwater and visited with the fellows there, and when that job came open, I applied for it, and it was I was offered the job. Dr. Matlock was the department head at that time.
And this job was this with the experiment station, or was this teaching on campus?
It was experiment station. I never did teach on campus, except if someone was gone, they needed someone to fill in, and that didn't occur but maybe half a dozen times in 25 years. I might have, something to relate to the students, something in regard to the research station, and of course I could do that anytime they needed. But to teach the class, there was very, very little of that.
Can you define agronomy for me?
Agronomy is the science of crops and soils, and it's sort of it kind of run out. They wanted to be a little more specific in what it was. So now that's the reason that they're calling it crops and soils. Not all universities have done that, but Oklahoma State has. And I don't know which other states have and have not. In some cases, the soils is in some other department and crops is in another department. I do know that. But I think that's the reason they made the change.
So agronomy can be used sort of interchangeably with crop and soil sciences?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, how does the Oklahoma Agriculture Experiment Station work within the university structure?
Well, it's part of the land grant objective as outlined when the land grant was was developed. I can't tell you how far back, but a long time ago. And that is the agronomy research stations are part of the research that is included in the land grant college.
How many experiment stations does the state of Oklahoma have?
From Oklahoma State University.
Yes.
I'm not sure. We had 13 of them, and I think there were probably maybe five or six more. Horticulture, see, we didn't have anything much to do with the horticulture research stations, which there was one over at Bixby, and it seemed like they had some other locations. Well, even their research station there on campus, we didn't have much involvement with that. You know, we might do a little trading or assistance to each other if necessary, but that would be about the only. But we had 13 in the Department of Agronomy.
Where were they located?
Well, of course, Stillwater, Perkins, in Muskogee County, in Altus, Tipton, Mangum, Chickasha, and then when I came back in 1970, they had just purchased a tract of land west of Enid in Lahoma, and then the involvement out at the Panhandle Research or Panhandle College, and let's see, there was one down in near let's see, Garvin County. We had a peanut research station, but it was abandoned back in the 80s. And Fort Cobb, the peanut station at Fort Cobb.
So these their crops are grown on these. What kind of crops are grown on them that would be grown? Is it just wheat, or is it soybeans, hay, cotton?
Yes, most of the Southwest stations were cotton. Altus, Mangum, Tipton, primarily cotton, although we did have some small grains research on those and some alfalfa. Now in Chickasha, during the time I was there, they reduced the amount of cotton research and was going to forage research. And so there was kind of a transition there, but they still have cotton there, as far as I know. I haven't been on the station for 10 or 12 years, but I'm satisfied they still have some cotton work there.
Is it has cotton fallen from the state production-wise, or is there less emphasis on cotton than there was in the past?
I think that it has, the cotton acreage has reduced somewhat, but how much I can't say.
And is that why the experiment stations is slowly dwindling with cotton?
Well, there's, I guess it's the economics of it, the reason they're no longer producing the number of acres that they did back a number of years ago. Now, one thing about cotton, they have done a lot of work on insect control. Boll weevil was one reason that it took the cotton acreage was decreased because of the boll weevil problem. Now they've pretty well resolved that problem, and I don't know if the acreage of cotton has increased. I would guess that it has, but I don't know And there's probably, there may be some competition associated with that, with Texas being such a cotton growing state in some areas. And so I'm just not that familiar with.
Okay. Speaking of acreage, how large are these experiment stations? Do they vary in size, or are they similar size?
They vary in size. Yes, they do. At Tipton, for example, we have only about 80 acres. And in Aldous, we had 160 acres there. And Mangum, we had 320 acres there. And there's, I think there's been some decrease in operations in the Mangum station. It was primarily developed back in the Dust Bowl days, trying to determine how to control the dust coming. It was a real light, sandy soil, good productive soil, but and then at Lahoma we had about almost 160. Let's see, I didn't mention the Clemmy station down at Bessie, south of Clinton there, and that was given to us by Mr. Clemmy before he passed away. And we had, I think, 300 or 400 acres there. Wow. And I think they've bought some more since I was involved in it. And that was primarily a range program. Well, it was about almost all range program there. And let's see, Lahoma was primarily wheat. The Panhandle there near Guyman was Goodwill was primarily wheat, and Chickasha is going to some of the forage programs a lot more than what they had before. Muskogee is crops and some livestock grazing.
What's the oldest agricultural experiment station?
Probably be the one there at Stillwater.
Was that started when the university was founded?
Yes. That's my thinking on it. That it was part of the land grant college when the program was initiated.
Now, what's the differences between an agricultural experiment station and like a normal university laboratory? Is there any differences?
Well, the laboratory may be a part of the research station. I mean, it's maybe not located on the research station, but it does some analysis of the work that's being done on the research station.
Okay, how does the experiment station fulfill the land grant mission? Maybe you can you expound on that further?
Well, I would say it's just part of the educational research and the extension program, and the research station is part of the land grant system and serves as part of the land grant system.
How are the experiment stations funded?
Well, I think there's probably at least two, state and federal, and then some commercial funding for the research stations, for work on the research stations.
Are the McGruder Plots part of the experiment station?
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. What can you tell me about the history? How do you understand the history of the Magruder Plots?
The McGruder Plots, as they are now, was just a fragment of what was initially located there on campus, on the west side of the campus, where some of the dormitories are. And the McGruder Plots, as we have them now, are the selected plots to be moved from the original location to the current location. And there were other plots in the same study, but these plots that were moved were the selected plots to be moved. And that was done back in the, you probably have the dates on that, when those were moved.
Were they selected because A.C. Magruder worked on them, or do you know how they were selected?
Well, of course, I wasn't there when they were selected, and I don't have a real knowledge of just what all went on. But it's my impression that they selected the research plots that they felt at that time would be the most valuable for the future, and moved those Magruder Plots to the present location because of at that time, their judgment as to which plots would be of the most value for the future.
How big were the original plots? You said they only kept the selected few acreage.
I cannot tell you the exact dimension of the plots at that time. They were, I think, they were somewhat a little bit larger than what the plots are now. I don't think they moved the entire plot. And somewhere in this literature it gives that, and there is another publication that probably gives more detail to that than over here. Yeah, there's those three fellows right there. Yeah, I was visiting with Dr. Tucker and Dr. Ron the other day, and I missed Dr. Westerman. He was not in.
If you can't find it, we could fill it in later.
Yeah,
I was just curious.
I'm not. I thought that in one of the publications it has a drawing of those plots, and I don't recall. I don't have that publication, and I don't remember what it was.
Okay. We can look for it. Now, in the current spot, has there been a time the plots were in danger of disappearing?
Yes, there was, and there was a lot of controversy about that, as I recall. When I was at K-State, I was involved in the last harvest of one of the long-term plots up there, under which now is the football stadium. And I told Dr. Westerman, or Dr. Tucker, I said, we can't let that happen if there's any way possible. So he he made contact with one of the history professors, and the name has left me. But anyway, they began to, in fact, at that time also, when he was doing that, I was out looking at other areas that might serve as a research station. And I had been asked to, which I responded, what would it cost to move that station? And just to move the facilities. Actually, you couldn't move the facilities. They're major, they're facilities you don't pick up and move. But my response to him, as I recall, is someplace in the $5 to $6 million. And this has been back probably almost 30 years ago, and no one had that kind of money to move, to do anything really. And so then I think the feeling sort of slowed down on trying to move those plots because of the potential cost and potential loss of a research program there. And at that time, Dr. Tucker was talking with one of the professors in history, I believe it was in history, getting some contacts and getting some suggestions as to how we might counteract the thought of moving those plots and moving the research station. And so it was decided that we would try to make it a historical site, the registered historical site. And Dr. Tucker continued to work on that until, and I can't remember how long it took, but until it was registered, on the register. And had not that taken place, who knows, the football stadium might be out there. But after that happened, then they lowered the level of the football field by six feet, I believe it was. And they hauled that out and put it on the research station. And it's kind of a low area there in the vicinity of the Magruder Plots. And so we're now farming it now. As long as it didn't molest the Magruder Plots, well, that'd be okay.
So you saw sort of a reverse history of it.
Sort of, yes.
So you're farming what once was the football field, whereas K-State, the football field was once the flats.
Yeah. I helped the last harvest on that plot that then became the football stadium.
How old was that, the one up in Kansas State, going when it was torn?
Well, you know, I can't. I was trying to remember maybe what that length of time was, but it was long term. But I can't tell you the number of years.
Okay. Can you place the plots within the context of Oklahoma, A&M, and OSU history? What has been their role? How are they perceived, and what attention do they bring to the campus?
Well, I think because of the longevity of those that program, I think that perhaps there's a lot of feeling there that it is extremely important that continue. Now, I think that not only is it valuable to get the number of bushels that's planted each year, or that is harvested each year from the planting of the Magruder Plots, I think that more than the number of bushels, there's analytical programs, Dr. Ron was showing us the other day some of the analysis that they're now using in the soil fertility program, and that was something that was not being utilized and carried on at the time I was up there.
Speaking of Dr. Ron, who else at your time at OHSU, who else have you seen or worked on the plots or conduct research dealing with the plots?
Well, Dr. Tucker before Dr. Ron, and before Dr. Tucker, I think Dr. Gray had some leadership there, and then prior to that, then of course all of the individuals that are Dr. Fenton Gray, and then Dr. OOHRP, and he was both of those fellows were professors up there when my dad went to school.
I was going to ask you, when did your father go to Oklahoma A&M?
I think it was 1927, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he went for a year and a half or 2 years, and then he couldn't go any longer. Now, when he went up there to go to school, he took his milk cows with him.
Really?
And he milked those milk cows and sold milk to help pay his way through college. And that lasted for, I guess, a couple of years.
Wow.
And then he decided he better get back to the farm with Custer, at Custer City, because I think he had his eye on a young lady back there. And she went to Southwestern at Weatherford and became a teacher at some of the little rural schools out in the Custer City area. So those are some of the people that worked on the McGruder Plots. And I knew both of them.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
As an undergrad or later on?
As an undergrad, and then later on also Dr. Harper and Dr. Fenton Gray.
What were they like? What was their personalities?
Oh, Dr. Harper was a very, very good researcher and teacher. He was one that wanted to get it done quick. Let's get after it. Let's get it done. And that's okay. That's not a criticism. And I knew him. Dr. Gray, I knew him, and he was more laid back. And I'm not sure just what contribution he made, but he did make a contribution. And then Dr. Tucker was very well. You just couldn't have asked for better people than Dr. Tucker, Westerman, and Ron to follow up on whatever needed to be done to get the maximum out of the program.
What was your working relationship with Doctors Westerman and Ron?
Very good. I mean, those fellows were, in my opinion, were super. And I first knew Dr. Westerman when I came back from Ethiopia and started my master's program. He was still there as a student,
Okay.
and then he left to go to University of Illinois. And Dr. Ron, I knew him when he was a student there, and he's the one that's doing a lot of the analytical work on the McGruder Plots. Well, soil fertility in general, but the McGruder Plots specifically.
What kinds of training do the plots offer students?
Well, it offers them, it gives them an insight of the importance of long-term soil fertility studies, research. There's value in knowing what some of the program was back in the 30s and 20s and 30s and 40s. I think they can look at the treatments and look at the yields and maybe the weather reports, and gives them some ideas to perhaps what they might expect if they had the experience of those kinds of programs in the future.
Can you explain how the weeds are tested and experimented on?
The wheat?
Like what's actually done to the wheat plant on the plots?
Well, they plant the wheat. They plant the wheat on the entire area, and then they'll watch and observe. They will observe the wheat as it's growing, seeing what, and it's quite obvious. The wheat on the check plot is not nearly as good as it is on the treated plots, and then to observe the yielding of the wheat on the various areas where there has been different treatments of fertilizer applied.
There are different wheat varieties in the plots, correct?
Well, there have been changes of the varieties that have been used in the plots, but the plots will all have the same variety.
Okay. What's the
in a particular year? They won't mix varieties on the Magruder plots during the year.
No. So what varieties of wheat are there that are grown on the plots?
Well, they will get the yield value, the yield amounts of the wheat that is being conducted, wheat research that's being conducted by the wheat breeders, and then they'll decide from the results of those then what to put on the Magruder plots.
Now, are the wheat varieties native or non-native species?
Well, they would be. They would be varieties that have been developed in wheat breeding program. Now, I think a non, like the old turkey wheat was brought over, I think, from Russia. And I don't know, probably back there in some years they probably used it, the turkey wheat. But each year they will determine, in conjunction with the wheat breeder, as to perhaps what wheat should be planted on that plot.
Are these wheats used for human consumption or animal feed?
It's human consumption primarily. Mm-hmm.
What kind of knowledge has been gained for the farmers from the Magruder Plot studies?
Well, I think the yield level of the plots is of interest to the farmers. And if that particular variety of wheat that has done well on the wheat breeding program would certainly should be considered to put on the Magruder Plots.
Where do you see the plots evolving as we head towards the near future?
I would see that the plots will be cared for and continued on from now on, as long as there's a research station.
What about the agricultural experiment stations? What about their role? Where do you see that heading into the future here?
In the future of
In the future, farming or
Oh.
research or
well, I think as long as the farmers can make a living with producing wheat, I think that they will continue to consult with the wheat breeders on what variety of wheat is the most productive in their particular area.
what kind of challenges do you see agriculture or wheat farming in general that farmers will have to face in the future?
Well, there's the price of fertilizer is going to be considered very, very strongly by the farmers. So the price of fertilizer has been going up and up and up and up, and I know that there are farmers that have decided they're only going to fertilize every other year, for example, and I think that's one of the big influences of the wheat production. And of course, you never know what the weather's going to be, so you can't plan to plant something that is going to be produced in a low rainfall year. There's no way you're going to know what that's going to be. There may be some ideas that people like our meteorologists might want to suggest, but who knows?
How have you seen the College of Agriculture grow and evolve at Oklahoma State University during your time and since you've been retired?
Well, I think that it has grown considerably. There were times during the time I was there where funding was extremely low, and you just barely hang on. And but I think that as long as the farmers can make a living by all of the inputs that they have and get a decent crop, then I think it'll proceed. Somebody's got to raise to feed the population.
Now, one last question. Do you consider yourself a cowboy or an Aggie?
I guess I don't know which I would be. I guess I'd be a Aggie.
Have to ask, since you went to OAMC before it became Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I told Dr. Wellham at the time they changed the name, I said, it didn't make any difference what the name of it is. To me, it's always going to be Oklahoma State or Oklahoma A&M. He just kind of laughed. That was in Ethiopia. He came to our program in Ethiopia, and I had the privilege of being on a trip with him out into the bush, and we were gone 2 or 3 days out in the bush, and really had a good visit with Dr. Wellham.
Now, is there anything you would like to add that we haven't discussed?
Well, I would like to commend the individuals that have been directly in charge of those programs, those McGruder Plots all these years. They've done a wonderful job. my input has just been that to see that what they want done to those Magruder plots is done correctly, and I've felt honored to down through the years to have that opportunity, and Magruder Plots to me, it's a real good program, and I think it should continue, and under the leadership of good quality researchers, and that's what we've had.
Well, I want to thank you for this interview today. Thank you for granting us the time. Thank you for inviting us into your home. We really appreciate it, and like I said, thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Today we're going to discuss his endeavors in Ethiopia. This interview is being conducted by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. My name is Jacob Sherman, and this is part of our series, the O State series. So thank you once again for having us in your home here today. And let's just, is there anything else that you could possibly share with us about your times at OSU that we didn't discuss last time before we get into the Ethiopia project?
Well, on arrival home from Ethiopia, I went directly into grad school and did the master's in agronomy with in the program of soil fertility. And Dr. Billy Tucker and Dr. Pat Murphy were guiding me through the program. Dr. Murphy was a professor at then Oklahoma A&M when my father was a student there in the late 20s. And then Dr. Tucker was there during the time I was doing my BS degree in agronomy. So I knew both of those fellows, and I knew that with their guidance and their assistance and help that I'd get a master's degree. It took me a little time to do it, but I did. I was working full time primarily for Dr. Tucker, and I finished the master's then. And most of it was completed by 1967, and I went to 63, and I went to Altus to coordinate the research station at Altus and Tipton, and was there for 3 years. I left there in 1967 and went to K-State to do the doctorate program. Came back to campus then in 1970, June the 1st, 1970. And so I was on faculty then until I returned and retired in 1995.
So you spent at least 3 decades at OSU then?
Essentially, yes.
And what kind of changes did you see the university? What kind of changes did you see occur to the university? Like, was there any philosophical changes? What kind of building changes? That type of thing.
Well, there were a few changes along the way. This was during a time that there was kind of a shortage of funding, and funding wasn't coming through. So there were some of the additions and some of the programs that could have been enhanced by some additional funding, but we attempted to go on with our program and do the best we could with what we had. And so there wasn't a great lot. Now, in my area, I was coordinating the operations of 13 research stations over the state of Oklahoma. And we occasionally we would add one, and occasionally we would close one. And this would be kind of determined by the importance of a commodity or the importance of what programs needed to be done at that time, and then of course the funding influenced that also.
Now, you've seen, how many university presidents did you see through your time there?
At Oklahoma State,
Mm-hmm.
I saw Dr. Wilhelm and then Dr. Com, I believe it was, and then Dr. I can't remember who followed Dr. Com, and
Halligan? How was that?
Halligan. No, Halligan was about the second one. There was another one there that I can't remember his name, but he was there for a short time. Then Dr. Halligan, and then there was a interim president, Dr. Dick. And he was president for interim time, and that was the first time we beat OU in football in many years. So we gave him credit for winning a football game with OU. I'll think of his name in a little bit.
Now, do you remember any particular style of leadership each had, or?
Well, Dr. Wilhelm was very cordial, and he was very open with his communications and contacts with him. The other fellows, the other presidents, they were likewise, essentially. There was the one that I'm failing to remember the name. He was there only a short period of time, and I never did have real contact with him. He was there a short period of time, and things didn't work out like the board of directors, I guess, the regents had envisioned, and so he moved on. And then Dr. Halligan came in, and Dr. Halligan was very, in my opinion, and I didn't have a great lot of contact with him, but he's very sociable, very nice fellow to know and be with occasionally.
Because you were head of the research stations, did you have much interaction with them, or no?
No, I didn't have all that much interaction with the presidents. I was the director or coordinator of the research station for the Department of Agronomy, and I had a lot of contact with the deans and the associate deans in the Division of Agriculture, and I enjoyed visiting with them, working with them, and it was a good experience.
Now, do any deans stand out in your opinion?
Well, Dr. It's been long enough ago that some of these names are kind of left me. Dr. Baker was a fellow that was very cordial. I didn't agree with all of his appointments, but that's not a problem. It's his decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dr. The next one that followed him was I wish I could remember all these names. They've kind of left me. But basically, I had a good contact with the people in the dean's office, and they were very cordial, and a lot of guidance, and so it worked out quite well.
Now, because the agriculture experiment stations is a separate line on the state budget, did you ever have to go to the state house and lobby for funds, or did you ever report down in Oklahoma City here?
No, not really. I was in Oklahoma City once or twice with some of the people out of the dean's office, but I was just simply with them to gotta get myself acquainted with where things were and who they were, and that was a good experience. I enjoyed going down there, but I did not go down there just waving the flag and trying to obtain additional funding at that level.
Okay, had to ask. Now, what was your interaction between farmers and yourself? What kind of interactions did you have?
I had a lot of interaction with farmers, and it would be in regard to the cooperation that they would provide, support they would provide for us out on the various research stations. Some of them were very cordial, and most all of them were. And if we needed a tractor, we needed a little plot of land to put a study on, a commodity study or a soil fertility study. It was we could do that about any time we wanted to. They were all very cordial, and that was helpful.
Now, what was your favorite aspect of being the head of the agriculture experiment station? What was your favorite component of your job?
Well, it was the association I had with the personnel on the research stations. Some of those fellows I had gone to school with previously, and some of them had been there when I was a graduate student, and I knew and kept real close contact with each one of them. And there was only 2 times in 25 years that I had problems with the personnel, and it turned out that they were invited to look for another opportunity someplace. And if I'd see them today, we'd shake hands and visit. And but the personnel, I think it wasn't just because I was supervising or coordinating the program. They were just good people, and I tried to be very supportive of them, and we would discuss the programs that we would want to proceed with, and sort of how would we do it. So that was the highlight of my experience in that position.
So, how much time would you be away from Stillwater with your job?
Most every week I would go to a research station, and normally they were a day out and back. However, if there was some particular program going on at a meeting of a night with some of the people there, or interviewing someone or something like that, I'd be out maybe a couple of days a week. but mostly it was just out and back in the day. I did have the opportunity to become involved in the National Research Station.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Program, and I enjoyed that. We would have at the agronomy meetings. We would have superintendents or people from stations from all over the country, all over the nation. And then we had what we call the southern or eastern, southeastern group, and we'd meet once a year, sometimes twice a year. And it was always interesting. In both of those occasions, we'd have our meetings, and then we'd tour the industry of that part of the country, and go to if it was like in Florida, we'd go to the citrus farms and the vegetable farms. If it was in California, we'd go to the the citrus and irrigation programs. And if it was in in Louisiana, we'd go to their programs down there. We'd go to research stations, and it was a very good experience. I really enjoyed that, and that was one of the regrets that I would miss that when I retired.
Were you did you have were you involved with leadership roles in those organizations?
I was the leader of each one of them at different times, and that was I really enjoyed that, because I had contact with a lot of people, and they were very supportive of our programs, and they would support the program that we were trying to present at annual meetings. So yes, I really enjoyed that.
So did you do programming work for those conventions?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember the research station group to begin with, with the national agronomy meetings. We did not have a section identified, and we would meet and plan. And eventually, we planned to present to the board of directors of the agronomy program that we be allowed to become a section of the agronomy program. And I was selected to make that presentation. I made that presentation to the board of directors, and we were accepted. And so I felt very good. It wasn't just what I did, it was what the entire group that I was representing did. And it was, and then the following years we would meet, and our membership increased considerably, and we had people from most every area of the nation, not every state, but
every region.
Every region of the nation. They were coming from New York, from California, Washington, and about every region of the nation.
Now, did you have much interaction with like neighboring states, agricultural experiment stations, Kansas, Texas, to name it, or?
Well, we we at those meetings would have contact with them. Now, I was asked to go at 2 different times for a review the programs. One of them was in Missouri, and the other one was in Tennessee. And I spent 2 or 3 days at each of those, and then I was asked to present a report of how I felt that program was being conducted, and make recommendations or suggestions as to what might be a better approach to some of their programs there. So I enjoyed that very much.
What kind of research stations does Tennessee have?
Tennessee has.
Is it cotton or?
Tennessee has a lot of research stations. The one that I remember, and I think it's probably no longer in operation, is tobacco.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
You're in tobacco country.
Right. And I knew that fella. I had met him earlier, and I don't know where he is now. And then Tennessee. One time we went to a lumber company, in Tennessee, and went through their sawmill, and then one time we went to one in Tennessee that was across the road from the manufacturing of the cars in General Motors. I forgot the name of the car now.
Spring Hill?
Spring Hill.
Yeah, they made Saturn.
Saturn, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so we got to go through that plant. And then another time we had the opportunity to go through a Nissan plant there in Tennessee. We went to the brewery that it was in a county that was dry.
Oh, the Jack Daniels brewery?
Jack Daniels.
Okay.
Right. Went through that. So we'd get to see a lot of different programs and so on.
That's cool. Now, let's fill in some gaps. I know she's going to ask that over there, but you met your wife as a neighboring. Was she a neighbor of yours? Is that correct? Or am I
That's
mistaken?
correct. We were born within 3 miles of one another in Custer County. And her family moved from Custer County over into Ellis County, I believe it was, anyway, north of Elk City there. And then sometime along about the 5th or 6th grade, they moved back into the Custer area. And I remember, and that's the first time I remember seeing her. It was noon one day when the weather was bad. The kids couldn't get out and play on the playground, so everybody was inside and just kind of rustling around. And I saw this little, I called her a little freckle-faced red-headed girl. I said, "Who is that little girl over there?" And they told me who it was. And so she was a grade ahead of me. And so I'd see her occasionally. And then she graduated in 1947 from high school. And we had a junior-senior trip to El Paso.
Okay.
And we really went high class farmer there put a tarpaulin over his wheat truck, and we rode in that wheat truck to El Paso. The next year we did the same thing, going down down to Houston and down in that area. But anyway, the coach was one of the faculty that went with us to El Paso, and he and one of my wife's friends and I were playing cards in the back of the truck as we traveled, and so we got to talking about what we're going to do tonight, and Coach said, "Well, Bill, if you'll take Jean to the movie, I'll take the other girl, I've forgotten her name, but I'll take her." So I said, "Okay, that'd be fine." So we got to El Paso and got into our motel, and some of the kids went on downtown and came back pretty quick. Said, "Don't go to downtown to the movie." Said, it's rough down there. You don't want to go down there. So we didn't. So the next night we decided, we would go downtown for the meeting. And so we did. I took Gene and he took the other lady, and then when we got home, we dated a little bit, and she went to work immediately into Oklahoma City Farmers Union, and so we dated a little bit, and just kind of as time went on, we'd see one another, and it was on and off, and so in I guess it was about 1950 we began to date pretty frequently, and or 49 maybe, and so it turned out that we married at Christmas Eve of 1950.
So, how did you propose?
Oh man, I don't know. I tell her that she was the one that proposed. she doesn't take that. I don't know. We just got to talking and decided that we just kind of get together and put it together, and to where we could be together and not have to drive.
Oh yeah.
And so there wasn't any big proposal or anything like that. I did get her a ring, but it wasn't anything real significant program. And so we were married in Christmas Eve of 1950. So we're not too far from being 60 years married.
Congratulations.
That ring's not been off that finger since she put it on there.
That's good. Now, so she moved back with you then after you got married to the farm?
Yes, I was a junior at Oklahoma A&M, and so we rented a little house, apartment across the street from the auditorium there on Husband Street.
I know that. Yeah.
Just across the street, there's a house there that had several little apartments in it. We moved into that and like to froze to death out there, but we made it.
Now, so you commuted back and forth, dated back and forth for you driving to Oklahoma City at that time, before you were married?
Yes.
From Stillwater to Oklahoma City?
Yes, and occasionally we would both go home over the weekend, and we'd meet at Custer County.
What do you remember about Oklahoma City from that time period?
Oh, it was Oklahoma City was kind of a fun place to go to. I had 2 or 3 aunts that lived here, and we were here as a family when I was growing up occasionally. And this coach that we was talking about brought us over 2 years, I believe it was, in December for the basketball tournament.
The all college invites, or what do they call it?
It was
Or was it the Big 8 basketball tournament?
well, no, it wasn't the Big 8. It was just a lot of different.
I think it was called all college invite.
All college, that's what it was. Yeah, and we would stay in the Skirling Tower Hotel. That was a real treat. And in the morning, we'd get up and go across the street to the radio station, WKY, and see the Superior program. Gene, Wiley and Gene. They had a 15 or 20-minute program. We'd go over there and watch that. We would watch it every morning at home, or listen to it every morning at home, but we wanted to see it. We went across the street to see it. So, Dixie Boy, Jordan, Wiley, and Gene.
There you go. So, now, you graduated in 54, am I correct?
Graduated in 52.
52 from OSU? Or OAMC at the time?
Right. Went back to the home farm.
Okay. And how long were you at the home farm before? So you were there 4 years?
4 years.
Before you went to Ethiopia?
Yes.
Now, how did you hear about the Ethiopian project?
Well, it was kind of, it happened kind of strangely, like Dr. Pat Murphy was in Ethiopia, and I wrote him a letter and told him that if they ever needed somebody that could work into the program in Ethiopia, that I'd like to apply for it. And he gave the letter to a professor that was over there, and that August of 56, I went to a field day at A&M there on the campus, and this professor that Dr. Pat had given the letter to was there, and I had known him from being on the crops judging team from Cameron, and so we chatted a little bit, and he said, would you come down to the Ethiopian office there on campus before you go back home? So, yeah, I would. So I went there, and he and the director of the program on campus there asked me if I would be interested in going to Ethiopia. I said, well, yeah. And the primary reason is drought years from 52 to 56, it like to drove us out. We couldn't make a living. And I said, well, sure, I'd consider that. So then a little bit later, probably along in July, they came out to the farm and Custer got in and visited with us, had lunch with us. And then soon after that, we were invited to come back to the campus and talk to Bill. Bill lost his last name, and we came and visited with him, and so they offered us the opportunity to go to Ethiopia, and so we scurried around, got things kind of gathered up, and in August of '56, we left to go to Ethiopia. And I told my dad, I said, I'll go there a couple of years and then come back and we'll farm. We'll farm again. Went over there and came home in '58 for a month, went back, and then came home again in '60, and I went to grad school.
Now, What was your family's reaction when they heard about this? Your plans of going over there?
Well, they were pleased that they had the opportunity, but they didn't really like to see us go because we had 2 little kids, and they were going to miss those kids probably more than they would miss us. And so we went over. We went ahead and went on over. They didn't try to bar us from going, and some people told us we were crazy for doing it, but we did it anyway. And so we enjoyed it, had a good time. It was a good experience, and Dr. Pat Murphy arranged for me to go to grad school when we came back in 1960.
Had you ever traveled before this extensively, or no?
No.
Did you have any apprehensions about going over there?
Not really, because Hugh and Ralph and Bill, a fellow on campus, they outlined things to us. We asked a lot of questions, and they were very helpful in explaining to us that you'll be provided a house over there. You'll have privileges at the embassy and so on and so forth. And there were a couple of hospitals there that would be available to us, and the embassy would have a nurse, and so you'll probably have servants, cook, and a housekeeper, and that all sounded rather interesting. So no, we didn't have very much to be concerned about.
Was there a formal selection process? Were there others applying to go over there at the same time, or was?
I really don't know if there were any that they were considering for that position other than me. I do know that there was a friend of mine that applied to go, and he was in ag education, but he was never selected to go. He did eventually go ahead and get his doctorate degree, and he did go to South America later, and he did some foreign service.
How did you physically get over there?
We flew from the airport here to Tulsa, or maybe Chicago, and then into New York. And we stayed the night in Masseria Hotel.
Really?
We thought we was in high heaven.
Yeah, the Waldorf Astoria.
Waldorf Astoria. And stayed, I think, one night, and maybe 2 nights, I can't remember. Anyway, I didn't have a suit. Living on the farm, I didn't need a suit, and so I went to some place there near the Masseria Hotel and bought a suit. And so then we flew to Zurich or Geneva, and stayed 2 or 3 nights, and that was kind of an issue of trying to get us away from forget about the farm, and we enjoyed that. Took some tours there in Geneva, and then we flew down to Rome and took a tour in Rome, and then from there we flew into Addis Ababa, and they had people there to meet us, and we went into a motel to begin with, and stayed there until a house was available.
What was your initial reaction of Ethiopia, Ethiopian culture, Ethiopians themselves?
Well, of course, it was a lot different than what we were accustomed to, but we had been told that the customs and the people and the country had been discussed with us, and so it was not a real big change or jolt for us. There were some things that we had to become acquainted with and accept, and which we did. I mean, you just do that. You're there, and you know you got to become acclimated.
What kind of items were you told that you needed to pack or needed to take over there?
Clothing and groceries. Even though there was a military post there, we could PX and get groceries, but we were told, take such and such, and took a washing machine so Gene could do the laundry, and didn't take any furniture, because we provided with furniture, and we took shoes for the kiddos. They wear this size now, and 6 months from now they wear another size, and so we tried to take shoes with us and clothing that the two kiddos would fit into. Our son, who's now a medical doctor here at the Mercy, was about 4 years old at the time, and our daughter, who now lives in Bartonsville, she was about a year and a half. She had her second birthday over there, and so we had to take things that would be needed by the children primarily, and I took some shop tools with me because I'm kind of a wood butcher, and so I don't remember anything particular, anything specific. I think we took an ice cream freezer too, to make ice cream with, and some odds and ends like that.
You had to ship that stuff separately, right?
Yes, we had the office arranged for a moving company to come out and load us up, and pack us and load us up and ship it, and it took about, seemed like 2 months maybe for it to arrive over there. I took some hunting gear also. They told me the hunting was real good. Took fishing gear and used it quite a bit.
Did you take guns over there?
Took guns.
Was that any problem?
No, didn't seem to be.
Okay. Because I've heard other stories where it was a problem.
Well, if there was a problem, I didn't ask any questions. I just wrapped them up in tarpaulins or tents or something and took them but I didn't bring them home. I left them over there.
Now, where were you assigned to live and work in Ethiopia?
Well, we were assigned to live in Addis.
The capital?
The capital, which is about 6,000 feet above sea level, and very, very good atmosphere, very good. And I was assigned to work in a little town about 30 kilometers out called Debrecen. Shaftu was the first name, and then it became Debrecen, which is a better name in their opinion. And I would commute each day. Occasionally, I would stay in Addis to do some shopping or talk with personnel, and but I would make that trip to the Shaftu about 3 or 4 times a week, and sometimes every day, and work with the Ethiopian people that were assigned there, and some of the American people that were there teaching at either at GEMA or at the college would have, pardon me,
Alimana?
Alamaya, yeah. They would come in and do some research, give me some directions on the research that they would like to initiate, and I would then carry out their research program in the fields for them.
You did field research, like you helped assisted with Ethiopian farmers, or what was your primary assignment?
I didn't help Ethiopian farmers very much. Now, if there was a fellow, there was an individual that was directed to work with farmers, and occasionally I would go with him then to show them how to use a plow that we had developed, or how to build a chicken house with. They kept most of their chickens in their house under their bed.
Really?
And so we would show them how to build stucco chicken houses with thatch roofs on them, and I would go out and help with that occasionally. We would take a machine, like a corn shelling machine, out to them and show them how to operate it. And one time we did that, took it out. They invited us in. They were building a new house, and they had the sticks in vertical position, but they hadn't put the stucco mud on yet. But they insisted that we come in and visit and see their house, and we did. And they were very gracious, and we saw the people outside kind of milling around, and saw a lady go just down the slope a little ways and pick some coffee beans. Well, we didn't know it, but at the time she was picking coffee beans and was going to process them and grind them and make coffee for us, which they did. And they also had killed a lamb, and nothing to do except we were expected and demanded to stay and eat with them, which we did. And it was very good experience. And injera and wat, which was their primary food, and I enjoyed it.
How would you compare the Ethiopian agriculture at that time, to American agriculture?
Well, it's the Ethiopian agriculture was very, very backdated. They still plowed with oxen and a one-row plow. They still had their chickens in their house. They still would cut their crops with a knife and tie up bundles and then take it in later and put it on a stomping called around, and then they'd run their calves or their cows over that to
grist?
To stomp out the grain.
Mm-hmm.
And
was that a grist? I forget. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, well, and it would be about the size of this house here, with diameter probably 30 feet. And I've seen them do that many times. And compare that with our tractors and combines, and there was just really no comparison, hardly.
So small plot farming? No large farms, or?
There were beginning to be a few larger farms as I left. Some of the students that were from wealthy families would obtain land areas out in their home area, and they would begin to buy tractors. They were bringing in tractors and plows, and beginning to farm similar to what we were farming. But that was just beginning to happen as we left.
Would you say agriculture was subsistence? They raised primarily to feed their families?
Yes, primarily. Yeah. Now they did export some of their agricultural products. They exported coffee. They would export some of the grains, but they had capability to produce a lot of grains, but they just didn't have the procedures down to do that until they began to farm with farm equipment. But the coffee, they exported quite a bit of coffee at that time, and they had good quality coffee too.
What was the climate like?
The 4 years we were there, I think I saw frost 3 times, and being that altitude, they had 2 rainy seasons. One big rainy season and one small rainy season, and other than that, it'd get pretty dry. But they could raise crops if they planned it correctly, and they had the capability to produce a good bit of their foodstuffs. Barley was a commodity. Wheat was a commodity. Teff was the primary one. It was a little bitty seed that they'd grind and make their bread, their injera.
Was it cold? Some mild winters?
It was the
Hot
rainy
summer?
season was a little bit chilly at night. At our house, when the sun goes down, it would be nice to light a fireplace and be very comfortable. Now that'd be during the cold season, the rainy season, and during the dry season, it wouldn't get all that cold at all. Although many of them would wear shawls or forgotten now what to call it, but kind of a big blanket they'd wrap around and then walk down the street. But they sort of invented what they needed in that regard. But when it rained almost every day.
Did they call them monsoons?
Oh, I don't think they weren't stormy like the monsoon. Would be my thinking on that.
So were they hot summers though too, or no?
Summers were pretty warm.
Pretty warm?
Pretty warm. Of course, it's being as close to the equator as it was. As long as you were in the shade, you could survive quite well. But you get out in the sun, it could bake you pretty good.
So you helped. Now I'm still need to clarify this. So you helped. You taught in the classroom farming techniques, or I'm just.
I never did have a classroom for them. On the station, I would show them how to plow, or how to gather, or how to process, or show them how to farm, they put out a research plot in a sort of a duplicated plots so that we could tell, what the capability of that crop was. Yes, I would work with them. And poultry, they had poultry there. We built a poultry house, and then it was sort of a modern one. And then we built some that would show them how to build a adobe house to put their chickens in. They had cattle. We imported some cattle from Oklahoma.
Really?
Sent over by air, and Holstein, and I believe it was Holstein and Jersey and Shorthorn. I believe
Dairy
it's
cows.
Yeah, dairy cows. And we had those there on the station, and the animal science director then would work with them and so that they could improve their herds out on the farm.
So you lived in a house or apartment or?
We lived in the house most of the time, well, except when we first arrived. And then we moved into a house that was vacated by someone that was in the program, but they had come home. And until that contract expired, we were in that house. Then we did move to another house, and then we had an opportunity to move to Bishoftu into a house that was the Ethiopian Airlines had people from the Netherlands, I believe it was, there giving them training in airline flying and airline business. And they had a house that was vacant and they weren't going to use it, so we were able to contract it and lived there about 8 or 9 months. And then they needed it, so we had to move back to Addis Ababa. And at that time, we moved into a house that was sort of in the central part of the lower part of Addis. And then we moved into another one across the swamp there that was a little larger. And by that time, we had a couple of kids, 2 sons born, I think. So we needed a little larger house. We took 2 children over and brought 5 home.
Oh,
3 sons were born over there.
Just a offhand question. How did Ethiopian coffee rate with American coffee?
Well, once you became accustomed to it, I think that it was as good a quality or maybe better than American coffee. It's in a great way the procedures they have in drying and grinding and roasting makes the difference primarily in the way the coffee tastes. But I really enjoyed eventually really enjoyed their coffee.
What about, do you remember any particular foods that you recall offhand that taste, that stand out in your memory of Ethiopian foods?
Well, yes, they would eat a lot of lamb and chicken, and of course there's some beef as well. And the way they prepared it, I really got hooked on it. I really liked it. In fact, at noon, when we get ready for lunch, many times I'd go with the Ethiopian workers that I worked with, people I worked with, we'd go to a little restaurant down in the village there and have injera and what. Injera was the kind of like a pancake that was made from their teff, and it was cooked on a round, big round piece of tin, and then when it was finished, it was kind of like a real thin pancake, and they would take that and dip into the injera, which was the meat and the beans that were cooked together, and they'd eat that. They didn't use forks and spoons, and I learned to do that.
Do you still eat Ethiopian food?
Occasionally.
Occasionally?
There's a Ethiopian restaurant here in Oklahoma City, down south here, and we occasionally still go down there to get injera and what and their foods.
Is it as authentic as what you had?
Yes, because these are Ethiopian people that run that, and they order a lot of their ingredients in from Ethiopia. Their berry, which is a powdered hot peppers, real hot peppers, and we have some in there in our freezer now that we use it on chili and different things like that. It's very good.
Now, you lived in the capital, right?
Yes.
Oh, how big was Addis Ababa?
I have heard, and it's I don't know how in the world they would count them, but around 2 million people in that area, and the city was not very well developed. You have a little trail going off this way, and a little trail that way, and off of the main drags, and you never know. They didn't have maps of the city or anything like that. You just have to have one of the students or some one of your workers kind of guide you around to where you needed to go.
Now, where is Addis Ababa? Is it on the Nile River, or I'm trying to think where it is?
No, it's probably a couple hundred miles west of what they call a tributary to the Nile, which is
Oh, that's right. The Nile doesn't run through Ethiopia.
yeah, it runs through the western part of Ethiopia. It's a tributary, but I can't remember. Blue Nile, I guess, is what it's called.
Oh, the Blue Nile?
And there's another name. Blue Nile I think the Blue Nile is further north there, and this river is, I can't remember the name of it right now, but that's where we would go to hunt crocodiles.
Really?
Yeah.
You hunted crocodiles?
Hunted crocodiles.
Do you have any? Can you share some of that experience?
Yeah, there was a Presbyterian mission station down there, and we became acquainted with the missionaries as they came to Addis, and they invited us to come down and go hunting and fishing and so we did. I was down there 2 or 3 different times. One time we drove down there, and the other times we flew down. We'd drive down. Of course, it'd take a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get there. You had to go in some pretty rough roads, and we were there. I think there's 2 or 3 or 4 of us went down in a 4-wheel drive Land Rover, and we were hunting, and you had to be real quiet because those alligators would hear you coming, and they'd slither off into the water. So we were up on the bank, and being real quiet, we saw a couple laying on a sandbar down in the river. And so we very quietly went down there and got about probably 100 yards from it. And we decided, well, we better do what we're going to do now, because if we try to go closer, they're going to hear us. So there were two of us at that time, and we shot, and I got one that was 9 feet and 8 inches, and the other fellow got one that was a little bit smaller, and this one that I got, I've never made such a direct, correct shot. I hit him just above between the eyes, and right behind his eyes there's his brain, and it just took the top off his head, and he wiggled his tail a couple of times and laid right there. At 9 feet, 10 inches, I believe it was. So there were some of the natives there, and they helped us skin that crocodile out. And I brought it home with me, and had some boots made from it, and camera cases, and I still have some around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so yeah, that was a good experience. We didn't do much fishing. We did some fishing, but not very much.
Mm-hmm. Did so you actually had you got that leather processed here in the Oklahoma?
No, I had the process in Addis Ababa.
Oh.
They export a lot of hides,
Mm-hmm.
and so there was a curing place there that I could take a crocodile hide to, and they did a good job on it.
No, I was wondering if there would have been a reaction. You walk into a leathery down here and, hey, I got this croc skin. That would have been funny to see their reaction.
Yeah.
Now, did you see any other exotic animals or have any other adventures?
I saw an exotic, I saw we would see the horned animals, they call them about like a deer. What was the name of it? I've forgotten the names of them now. And I'm just trying to recall those names now. And we would go frequently. We would go hunting fairly close to where we lived, but we'd have to go down rough trails and early in the morning, and we'd usually get like a deer, but they call it something different. And we lived on deer meat, and then we'd hunt guineas. They were guineas that they were the white meat rather than dark meat like guineas, domestic guineas here, and partridge. And when we lived out of Addis there for that 8 months, that's about what we lived on, was game that we get. And then I never did get a shot at one. It was way far off, but it was a lion, real dark lion, one night, and I guess that was primarily what we saw. There were a lot that we didn't see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was now you lived in Addis Ababa. Did you experience any of the political culture that was going on at that time?
Just a little bit before we left, there were some Russians coming in, and they were not really welcomed. Is my impression from the general population. But and I'm not sure just why those Russians got a foothold in there, but they're the ones that eventually took over after we left, shortly after we left. That was the primary political thing that happened while we were there. Nothing more. We had pretty close contacts with the Emperor, Haile Selassie. Haile Selassie came to the research station on 3 different occasions. I had the opportunity to host him on the station, and he was always very, very cordial. Of course, I was trying to be as cordial as I could be to the Emperor, and he was always interested in the crops, the livestock, the poultry. And one time we were at the livestock building that we had built, looking at the livestock that we had imported from the U.S. And he seemed to be real quite pleased with what was going on. And so I said, Your Majesty, we have a poultry place here too, if you would like to see it. Well, yes, we'd like to see it. I said, it's right over there. I'll get in my vehicle and drive over there, and you get in your car, and I'll meet you over there. No, we will walk over there. And so he and I started out walking across probably less than a quarter of a mile. It wasn't very far. And he was a very, very energetic little fellow that he was not as tall as I am and thin, but he was just walking right along very briskly and visiting as we were walking. And so we looked at the poultry place there, and he had some of his little grandchildren with him, and they were, of course, interested in playing and running around there. And we would show him different things each time he came. And he was always very gracious and seemed to be very pleased with what he was seeing. So that was and then each Christmas, the royal family would invite the American community to come into their home for desserts and so on. And they would have a row of tables that must have been 50 feet in length, and they would have all kinds of desserts, cookies, cakes, pies, you name it, they had it. And we had an opportunity then to visit with the royal family at those times. And we would walk in very cordially and bow as we went in. And when we left, we would go back, we'd step backwards, and we'd bow on our way out. And that was the custom. And I guess, I don't know if we had that opportunity the 4 years we were there. We may have missed 1 year, I can't remember. But anyway, they were always very cordial in inviting us to the castle.
What was that castle like? What do you remember?
Oh, it was very a very clean cut, usually large rooms of what we saw. Now I'm sure that in the living areas there were probably more smaller rooms, but most of these rooms and corridors were they were huge. They would be 50, 75 feet long, maybe 40 feet wide or 50 feet wide, and the halls leading to those was wide and decorated with their decor, and very clean, just as clean as could be. From the outside, they were stone, big cut stone, and very elaborate, very elaborate. He had at least two castles, I say castles, palaces there that we were in, and then he had a palace on the lake right within a mile of the research station.
Oh, wow.
And I'd been up there once or twice, not just drive up there and turn around and come back out. I'm just curious as to how it looked. Very nice castle or palace. And he would go there on the weekends for rest and just to get away.
Now, did the Ethiopian people revere Haile Selassie, or?
They did. I suppose there was a segment of them that had some opposition to him. I was never really knew what that group was, how many there were, how much opposition they had, but I get the feeling, and this is just my feeling, that that's probably the group that might have enhanced the Russians to come in and take over. But most of the population that I was aware of really admired him greatly, and I think that it was just when he fell, there was just a few of them that arranged that.
Now, let's get back to your work assignment. Was there any difficult parts of your job that was difficult to complete?
Not really. I could have. We had a truck. We had a tractor, a big tractor. We had a couple of small tractors, and we had a combine. So we were pretty well equipped with it wouldn't be the equipment that we would buy back here, but it was equipment that was available there. Now, at the end of the Italians being in there, they left a lot of equipment around all the country, and it was put in what they call the equipment yard, and so we had access to some of that, and we could obtain equipment that would be advantageous to us from there and use it on the station. That tractor came from there. It was there when I arrived. It was a big, coming down the brand new, but it was a huge crawler tractor. And then the program bought, I think, 2 tractors while we were there.
Did you see any other remnants of the Italian invasion?
Oh, they put roads all over the country, and we saw those roads. We traveled on them. They were cobblestone, big stones that they would take out of the mountains and put along to make a highway, and they were rough. It was a road, but it was rough, and they put up a lot of buildings too, and they trained a lot of Ethiopians into trades, and they married in to the Ethiopian population, And there were still a lot of Italians there in business and had enterprises of various kinds that was needed there in Ethiopia. Now the Ethiopian, the Italians, as I recall, they were not allowed to own property. But if they married an Ethiopian lady, then they could, the lady could own property and have a business. And so that was the way that many of them operated. But the Italians, even though they were in the country for a long period of time, they did a lot of training to the Ethiopian population. They trained them to do a lot of things, a lot of mechanical things, building capabilities and so on.
And it also sounds like you moved around a lot. Is it because your family kept growing, or just different?
It was just to more, maybe a larger house or a more convenient house, or it wasn't forced or anything like that. It was just opportunities that normally we'd move into better surroundings.
How were you paid?
We were paid. A check would go to our bank in Custer City, and then we could get checks cashed at the embassy, or we could get checks cashed at sort of under the blanket to some of the retailers. There was a tire store, sold a lot of big truck tires. I can't remember the fellow's name now, but he could take our check and he would send it to Europe, and Europe would then send it to, and usually they'd give us a better rate than going to a bank or going to the embassy. The embassy had to cash our checks exactly according to the comparison of value. They couldn't give us extra money, but these retailers, they could give us extra money.
So the Ethiopian government paid you?
No, the American, it was our program that would pay us, and they would pay us from Stillwater.
Okay. I was just curious how that worked out.
Yeah.
What about the mails? How long would it take for you to send a letter back to the States, and how long would it take for a letter to get back?
Oh, maybe like a week. We had military privileges. There was a military group there in Addis, and they'd send it to what they call it, APO.
Armed Forces Post Office.
And we would get our mail that way, and we could order things out of Sears catalog or other catalogs, as long as it was small. They wouldn't.
You're not buying a house and sending it over.
Right. Yeah. But we ordered from John Plain, I believe, was catalog at that time. We ordered a few times, not very many. From John Plain, they'd come APO.
How long were your contracts?
Usually a 2 year.
2 years.
2 year contract.
And you had the option to re-up?
Yeah, we'd have the option to re-up. Of course, it had to be a need on their part too, continuing of the program. If they were going closed the program, then they wouldn't need us anymore. But we decided to re-up, and I talked to them about it. Yeah, that'd be fine. We'd like to have you. And so then when we left, then there was another fellow that I used to go to school with at A&M, went over, and he took my place. And I don't know if you've ever met Dr. Ed Smith there on campus. He went over then the next time. And yeah, it was just, as long as you did your job, well, you could go back if the program was still open.
Did you have much interaction between fellow Americans over there?
Oh yeah, yeah. All of the Americans, they would have programs of various kinds. The embassy, the missionaries. We had very close contact with 3 different mission programs. There was a Presbyterian and what they call the Sudan Interior Mission, which was funded by and a lot of small churches participated in that. And then there was a American Baptist group there, and we had contacts with all of them pretty close. The fact is, there were times that we'd go to church 3 times on Sunday because their services were different times.
How would American holidays were celebrated? How were they celebrated?
We'd get the American holidays as we would if we were here, and then we would also get the Ethiopian holidays as they came up, and so it was kind of interesting. We had lots of holidays. Ethiopians had a lot of holidays, and we had the option to take those holidays as well. So we had a lot of holidays.
Like what were the holidays that were different between here and Ethiopia? Like names of and what kind of celebrations? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, the Ethiopian holidays, there would usually be a big parade with the emperor at the head of it, and there would be all kinds of vehicles decorated, a lot of people walking, a lot of groups walking and with flags and decor, and it was just really a big event, and there would be a lot of Ethiopians that were involved in it, and it was rather colorful. And now the American, we would a lot of times, like for Christmas, we'd get together, various families, and there weren't very many programs that I can recall that we went to that was sponsored by the embassy or the American military group that was there. They would have parties. They might have a party on that holiday, but there was nothing that was regular.
How long did it take for you to feel culturally acclimated to Ethiopia?
Oh, I don't know, it was probably 6 months or so that we kind of worked into it, and it was sort of routine then, and that we felt comfortable with it. We always had servants, a cook, and a housekeeper, and sometimes a gardener, and then a night watchman, and those people we were pretty close with. One of the ladies would help take care of the kids quite a bit, although Jean took most of the care for the children. But we could, she was dependable enough, we could leave the kids with her and go to a party or go to an occasion or go shopping or whatever.
What was the thing that caused the most culture shock for Americans, in your opinion?
Well, it was probably the fact that you couldn't go down to a Sears Roebuck or a J.C. Penney or a Macy store and shop. It'd be the limitation of shopping privileges.
Now, what did you find that you missed the most about the United States? Like, what kind of things did you miss the most?
Well, missed family
Yeah.
more than anything else. Yeah. But some of the people, the Americans that were there, we associated with enough that it sort of, to a limited amount, you kind of felt like they were family. But the lack of being able to go to Grandma and Granddad's house or Uncle Dad's house, that was probably the thing that we missed the most.
Did you travel anywhere else in part of that region outside of Ethiopia? In Africa at all?
Within Ethiopia, we did ride the train over to Drought one time and stayed with the group. That was where the college was built, near Drought, north there, south there, Drought. And we went over and stayed with a couple of families, 2 or 3 nights over there. Took all the little ones with us, and we rode the train over at us. I recall we may have flown. I can't remember. They did have a train, and it was a fairly slow train, a small train, and it had 2 or 3 cars on it, and it was an interesting ride to do that.
Did you bring back any mementos of your trip?
Oh yeah.
Of your experience, I should say?
Oh yeah, we brought back a lot of lumber for this table. We brought back, I made the sea freight crates out of native lumber. And that table was made from some of those sea freight crates that I dismantled when we got home. We had that built in Ethiopia, and these chairs, 2 there and 1 here. We had 8 chairs, but they were not all that substantial, and we had broken some of them, but we sold them at a garage sale. And I wish ever since I'd have kept them, because I could have
refurbished them.
Yeah, refurbished them. And we brought back a table that's in there where the ladies are sitting, and our bedroom furniture. We brought back 3 sets of bedroom furniture, and made out of that wood, just like that. And one of them, and then the other was made out of a kind of a cherry looking wood, and another one was in a lighter colored wood. And we still have some of those. We have, of course, the master bedroom. But some of the kids, as they moved on, they took some of their furniture. And that was the biggest amount of momentum that we... Memento that we brought. See that little stool sitting right there behind us?
Yes, I see that.
Now that we brought back one of those for about all of our siblings and a lot of people. And that's a small version of it. I think there's one right behind you there, but the door.
Oh, right there.
It's on the other side
Yeah,
of the,
I see it.
yeah, round,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And we have another one outside there. We only have 3 of those left. But yeah, we brought back quite a bit of things like that.
Any artwork or anything like that?
Not much.
Wood
art.
carvings or?
Not, we brought back, I don't think we've got any wood carvings that I can think of.
Okay.
Just furniture primarily.
Did you take photographs or did you document your experience?
We've got a lot of slides.
A lot of slides?
A lot of slides, yeah. I'd like to get them put on a disc sometime. I just haven't taken time to sit down to sort them out and have that done. But I want to do that sometime. Yeah, we have hundreds of slides.
Yeah. Wow. What else I was going to ask you? Do you still keep in contact with any people that you shared your experience with?
We've maintained some contact with some of the missionaries, but one of them has passed on, another, 2 of them's passed on, and I talked to the widow of one of them 3 or 4 months ago, and she's kind of in bad health.
Mm-hmm.
So we're about to lose our contacts with the missionaries. Now with the people that were in our group that were over there, a good many of them have passed on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one fella in Stillwater, Conrad Evans, I don't know if you know him or not.
No.
And then there are others, a few others, but the group has really dwindled down.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing we run into as we try to collect people's stories about their experience over there.
Mm-hmm.
But Conrad Evans is still?
Mm-hmm. As far as I know, he still lives up on north of the high school there.
Okay.
And he'd be a good one to interview if you're interested.
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. Now, let's see here. Let's try to go through these questions.
He spent a lot more time there than we did.
Mm-hmm.
We spent 4 years, and I think he spent 10 or 12 years over there.
Now, what impact on your life did this experience have?
Well, it kind of gives you a feeling of how some other people live or have to live. It's interesting, and it's really, in some cases, it's sad that some people are living at the level that they are. Hundreds and thousands of people over there don't have access to medical services, and that's bad. That's sad. As far as the people are concerned, they're great people.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I really admired the people and the servants that we had. We trusted them totally. Students that we had, they were, some of them really brilliant. And they went on and came to the U.S. and did work on their additional degrees, and it was a good experience, good experience to have that opportunity to visit with people and work with them and become friends of them.
Did the program live up to Henry Bennett's legacy?
Oh, I would say it to some extent, yes. Now, there were some things that perhaps was not, and I'm not sure what all of his, I guess I don't know if I ever was aware of all of his visions, but I think that all of his visions that were capable of being solved, I think they were solved. Yeah, Henry Bennett he had a lot of vision for that program, and I remember seeing Henry Bennett on a few occasions, and he was just as sincere about that as anything he'd ever done.
Were you at OSU when Dr. Bennett passed on?
He was killed in that plane wreck, and I think that was my first year there. I think that's correct. And went to the service over in the what's now the basketball court.
Gallagher IVA.
Yeah. And I remember Governor Bob Kerr, did the eulogy part of it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
What was the campus mood when that happened?
Well, it was, of course, not a lot of people were associated and knew what was going on over there, but those of us that had a care for that kind of work, yeah, it was a solemn, it was a sad situation. And Dr. Bennett had been such a support of OSU, and everybody just really loved him as a dad, you might say, and it was pretty solemn.
Now, how would you think people should remember Dr. Billy Webb? How would you want to be remembered?
Well, I'd like to be remembered by people as being a helpful, someone who was serious about what he was doing and serious about what he could do for others. And basically that kind of and hopefully I've lived up to some of that, but you can always do more.
Now, is there anything else you would like to add?
I'd like to say this, that it's my associations with Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma A&M University. My associations to me have been extremely great, and that's been a gracious, very gracious opportunity that I've had to be associated with the university and to work with people like I worked with in Ethiopia and at the university. I don't know anyone that I wouldn't shake hands with as they came in that door that I've worked with or have known. There's been some people that I've been concerned about and probably had a little bit of less respect for them, but still yet, if they came in that door there now, I'd be glad to shake hands with them and greet them because that's just you can't get crossways with people in Shadow Mountain. You should not do that.
Yeah.
And, some of the best people that I've ever worked with is Dr. Tucker and Dr. Westerman. And those two people have been really enjoyed, and they've been very supportive of me, and they have great families. And Dr. Westerman's still serving.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him here sometime back if he was going to retire. He said, well, he'd retire when they put him in his box and haul him off to a hole.
That's right.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Definitely.
And I've really appreciated everyone, especially those two, and Dr. Pat Murphy, and different ones that I've worked with all these times. I could probably name 100 people that have been extremely gracious to me and helpful.
Well, sir, I thank you for the time that you've given us both times. We truly appreciate capturing your story, and once again, thank you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks to you, and I've enjoyed it.